Today, it's a wonderful day in the neighborhood, right? Today's the day that we are going to remember Mr. Rogers. Fred Rogers was a Presbyterian minister. He was ordained as an evangelist to children. And he got into television because he hated it. He hated television. He said that he saw on TV in its early days somebody take a pie and smash it into the face of another person, and he found that to be very demeaning. And he said if there's anything that makes him angry, it is when one person demeans another person. He noticed that the space between the TV screen and his audience was holy. In fact, he called it holy ground. And he understood that the words that he spoke to the children who were listening would create something new in them, would transform them. And he took that responsibility very, very heavily. He called in a team of psychology experts every single week to go over every word of dialogue in his programs to make sure that whatever he said would have a positive effect on the children listening. And he began every taping of every program with the prayer you just heard me pray a moment ago. Dear God, let some word that is heard be yours. Now, we were talking last week about spiritual conversations. Did anybody have any last week? Okay, you don't have to raise your hands. I don't want you to out yourselves here. Still want you to have spiritual conversations because we know that there are so many words that we're not using as much anymore that we should be using. Words like God, words like sacred, sin, repent, courage, and kindness. Those are the words that over the last 75 years we have not been using as much, and we need to continue to use because they inform us. They show us how to be people of faith. So today, maybe you can guess what our word is. It's neighbor. So let's start with the definition of that word. What does the word neighbor mean? It has two roots to it. The first part of the word is nigh, which means near. And the second root word is geber, which means dweller. So neighbor literally means near dweller, somebody who dwells near to you. And that's the way most of us use that word. Now, if we looked at the Hebrew scriptures, we would find another definition in the book of Leviticus. Chapter 19, there is a place where neighbor is defined for the Israelite people. And the definition there is one of our own people. Now, that definition is the definition that many of our evangelical Christian friends and neighbors use when they say things like, America first, make America great again, let's take care of our own and nobody else until we have taken care of our own. That is a biblical definition. However, if we keep reading in Leviticus, we come across another definition of neighbor where that initial one is expanded to include the stranger, the traveler, the migrant worker. And in fact, in the Torah, over and over and over again, the Israelites are reminded to be kind to the stranger because you were once strangers in Egypt. Then we have Jesus, who in classic Jesus style takes the definition that everybody thinks they now understand, and he enlarges it again to include everybody who needs help, no matter who they are. So in our reading today that Cindy shared with us, we have a lawyer who is asking Jesus a question. And we know right from the beginning that the lawyer wants to trick Jesus or entrap him in some way. Now, in Luke's gospel, every time you see the word lawyer or the word scribe, those are interchangeable, they are always portrayed negatively. So we already know as a reader of Luke that something's coming up here and we need to be watching for it. And initially, this lawyer and Jesus agree. They agree that the greatest commandment is to love God and to love your neighbor as yourself. That's pretty clear. But then the lawyer presses. He is an expert in the law of Moses, so he knows what Leviticus says about the definition of neighbor. He understands that. And yet he still asks Jesus, who is my neighbor? And of course, Jesus tells the story that we all know so well about the Jewish man who's traveling from Jerusalem to Jericho, falls into the hands of thieves and robbers who beat him and leave him for dead. And then a priest and a Levite both walk by, people from his own group of people who are his neighbor. They walk by and they don't help him. And then another person walks by, and he's a Samaritan who's a foreigner, a traveler, and despised by the Jewish people. And yet this is the one who stops to help the man. Now let's unpack that just a little bit, and let's start with the priest and the Levite. Generally speaking, all priests are Levites. They are from the tribe of Levi, and it was their job. You can read about this in your Old Testament, your Hebrew scriptures. It was their job to take care of the temple sacrifices, and the Levites' job was to take care of the running of the temple. So all priests are Levites, but not all Levites are priests. But they all know the law. They walk by and they leave the man on the side of the road. Now, why do you think they do that? There is a law, another law, that says do not touch a dead body or you will be ceremonially unclean. And they might think that this man is dead or as good as, and so they're not going to touch him. They might be thinking this is a busy road, because it was, and somebody else will come who has a little more time, and that person can help this man. Or they might be thinking there's a lot of thievery going on this stretch of road, which is also true historically. And they might have thought, well, if we stop to help this guy, the thieves could just be hiding somewhere, and they're going to come out and they're going to attack us too. So I'm not trying to make excuses for them. I'm just saying, maybe those are all reasons why they would not stop to help a man who's injured on the side of the road. But as I study this text, I had to notice in my own life how many times I walk by the person on the side of the road. How many times I drive through an intersection where somebody has a sign that says, please help, need money for gas, will work for food. How many times I think, well, I can't stop and help them because I almost never carry cash. This is true. And so I don't have any way to help them. Or maybe I'll see another car rolling their window down and giving them $1, and I say, see, somebody else will help them. I can't do it right now. Or maybe I even think I'm a female traveling alone, so it's not really safe for me to stop and roll my window down and hand this person money, because I just don't know. Now, I'm not trying to make excuses for myself either. I just want us to take this story and pull it into today's context so that we can see how we might respond if we were walking down the street and we see someone in need on the side of the road. Are we likely to help or not? And many of us say, well, there are organizations in the community that are designed to help folks like this. And so we can feel good giving our money to other organizations and not interacting with the person specifically. So think about that for a little bit, and if it makes you a little bit uncomfortable, then you're probably just like the lawyer who also has probably walked by people, beggars, anybody in his time and place and not helped them. And now the words of Jesus are working on him a little bit. And then we have the Samaritan. The Samaritan is the person who comes by and sees this person lying on the side of the road in need and stops to help that person. Now, the Samaritans and the Jews dislike each other. It's an us and them situation. And I don't know how much they historically didn't like each other. We only know that that's been reported, that they stayed separate, that they didn't respect one another. The Samaritans were considered a half-breed, Jew and something else. They had their own place of worship. They had their own ways of worship. And the Jewish people, of course, had theirs. So this is a foreigner traveling on this road from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he stops. Now, I want you to imagine for just a moment, what if the person lying on the side of the road was a Russian soldier, and the person traveling who stopped to help was a Ukrainian refugee? What if the person lying on the side of the road had just come from their Ku Klux Klan meeting, and the person who is traveling, who stops to help them, is a black person? What if the person lying on the side of the road is an Israeli, and the person who is traveling is a mother from Gaza whose babies are starving? What if the person lying on the side of the road is wearing an alligator Alcatraz shirt, and the person traveling is an undocumented person? Is this making you feel a little uncomfortable? Because if it is, that's how the lawyer was feeling when Jesus said it was a Samaritan who was traveling, who was filled with compassion and stopped to help this other person. Now, Jesus asks the lawyer, who was a neighbor to that man who was injured? And the lawyer cannot even bring himself to say the word Samaritan. He said, the one who showed mercy. Our words matter, and Jesus' words were working on this man on the inside. One of the things that I find missing in many of the Bible stories is what happened next to this lawyer. Did anything change in his life because of this story? When Jesus talked to Martha about Mary's choice to listen at his feet, did Martha change in any way, or did she just go back in the kitchen and slam the cupboards? I always want to know what happens next. And the truth is, what happens next is whatever happens in us as a result of hearing the story. Because the words matter. The words create in us and they change us. And this is something that Mr. Rogers fully understood. There were two stories that I read recently I want to share with you. They both came from the book Learning to Speak God from Scratch by Jonathan Merritt. And they are about Mr. Rogers and his ministry and the way that he reached out to neighbors he had never met and would never see. In 1998, this is toward the end of Mr. Rogers' ministry, a father came to him to thank him. This father had a son who was autistic. And the child had never spoken and had never looked his father in the eye, could not make eye contact. But he loved to watch Mr. Rogers, so they would turn on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood and their son would watch the show. And one day, with no warning, the child spoke. Now, when our kids first spoke, everybody's so excited. Is it mama or dada? You know, there's always that. I think I heard mama. And my husband thinks they said da-da. We don't know. But this child said, X the owl. It was one of the puppets that Mr. Rogers used. X the owl were his first words. Once the parents realized he was capable of speech, they began to work with him a little bit more, and they were using the words from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And one day the father said to him, let's go to the neighborhood of make-believe. Another line that Fred Rogers used in his program. And when he said those words, his son looked at him directly in the eyes for the first time. That child went on to learn how to speak and to learn how to read. And that father found Fred Rogers and thanked him in person for making that difference, that transformation in their child, just because he spoke to children with respect and talk to them as if they understood, because they do. In the other story, we have another boy who was watching Mr. Rogers, and this child was abused by his biological parents. He did not have a bed, he did not even have a warm blanket, but they had a TV in the house, and he would watch Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And after a while of watching that program and letting those words sink in, he began to imagine that there are kind people in the world and that he deserved to be treated with respect and kindness. And so one day he mustered up all the courage he could, and he dialed the number of the child abuse hotline that was on his screen. And an operator answered, and he was rescued. And in a bizarre twist of events, the hotline operator ended up adopting this child. This is the power of words. Even when you're not in the room with a person, when you're speaking the words, when people are allowing the words to transform them, I have always wanted us to be a church that is vibrant and vital and transformational. And I've been waiting for the Holy Spirit to come and do something in us. And all along, we are already equipped with everything we need. We have the words. We know how to use them because the words that we use and the meanings we attach to those words will change us, change our church, change our neighborhood, change our community. The container for the word is important. Words mean nothing without the container that we place them in. And so the word neighbor, what did that mean? Is it just someone who dwells near you? Is it one of your own people? Does it also include the stranger, the traveler, the migrant worker? Does it include, as Jesus tells us today, those who are in need? Or does it include everyone, just by the nature of their humanity, which is what Fred Rogers would say? We are all neighbors if we are human beings. There is no other criteria. So today, as we prepare for our neighborhood party, welcoming people into this space, I think it would help us to know how we define the word neighbor. How do you define it? What does it mean to be a neighbor? What can we do as a church to be a good neighbor? Because however you define that word and use that word, it will determine how you live, how you love, how you act in the world. So how do you define neighbor?